I am definitely a very special guy. I just set the camera up beautifully to film me sawing the scarf joint and forgot to hit record. So you don't get to see that. What you can see is the output. Just cut this on the bandsaw, which did a bloody admirable job, gotta say. That's how it was before. This is how it is now. As it is, just as I was explaining before, what I'm going to do now is flip this bit, and it's going to get glued on, here, on the top section. Now, what you might notice, if you're very astute, is that this here isn't long enough for a headstock. Which, if you remember, I spoke about before. I said it needs to be. How we're going to address that is I am actually going to thin this piece out to about 20 mil. A headstock needs to be around 15 mil thick. I'm going to thin this down to around 20, so I've still got room to play. What that will mean, though, is when I glue this on, rather than coming all the way back here and then coming down, it will start breaking off at around this point here. Should be quite a bit thinner. That's going to have a couple of benefits. It means that the place for the nut will be up around here somewhere, meaning the scarf joint itself on the neck is going to start here, which is going to be at about the 2nd fret. If I had cut this scarf joint at a point where there was enough underside here to make the full headstock, the scarf joint would have started at around the 5th fret, which would have looked a little bit weird, just slightly too far up the neck. This way also, by cutting it further down, I'm going to end up with more usable space on the length of this neck blank, which might be important later on. There was about 6 or 7 centimeters of extra length in this anyway, but better safe than sorry, right? So yeah, that's cut. Now these are really, really rough and need to be tidied up. So I'm going to show you my jig that I use for sanding scarf joints. This here is my scarf joint sanding jig. Borrowed the idea from David Fletcher, a really good builder who posts a lot of videos on YouTube, which is basically where I learnt to make guitars. Now, the way this jig works is these rails are at the angle that I want my joint to be at. There's a center line that runs down the middle. You take your piece of wood where you've already rough cut your angle into it. It goes in the jig like so, with the center lines on the piece of wood matched up with the center line on the jig. It goes all the way forward until it's right up against the front here, or maybe even a little further forward if you need to, because the face here needs to end up level with the rails, so may even need to push it a little bit further forward, or adjust it as you go. But once it's lined up in there, I hold it down with double-sided tape mostly, but then I also, when I clamp it to the workbench from the back, the clamp will also be on the timber itself, holding it in place. I've then got this little sled that I've made. It's got lines down the middle representing the inside edges of the rails, I don't know if you can see that, and sticky sandpaper goes in here, a nice tough grit. Once the piece is in the jig and you've got the sandpaper on here, it goes on top and simply slides forward like that. Actually has to be over the edge of the workbench, but slides forward like so. Sands the angle that you need into the timber. It takes a bit of time and it's bloody hard work, but it gets a really, really good result. Very simple jig to get a very nice even face on something that's not an easy cut to make. So this is the jig all set up now. The neck's in there, all lined up with the center lines. There's tape on the underside of the sled, and I'm not going to film this for long because I'm aware of how boring it would be. But basically, now that it's in there, this just slides up and down like this. For about 1,000,000 years until it is nice and even. So here I go. I've got both halves of the scarf joint sanded out now, and this is just a dry run of how I'm going to clamp it. Scarf joints are notoriously difficult to clamp because there's no sort of square way to just clamp them. They end up sliding all over the place. What I've done is an idea I've borrowed from the interwebs. I've clamped down a long piece of timber here that can be held square with the headstock. Butted the headstock up against it, line the neck up, and then I've clamped the neck to the bench. Now that neck won't move and the headstock's free. What I'll do is smear some glue in here and on the back of the headstock, butt it up, get it exactly how I want it, and then when I whack those clamps on, the headstock can't slip away because this block's here. Here it is under clamps. You can see the maple strip there lines up really well. That was something I've been working towards from the start, was making sure that that would be a nice line up there.